Johnson and Kimball. And, I don't know, they couldn't get along. They couldn't get along with us, and they couldn't get along with themselves. They finally, we went to court and convinced them that they ought to pay, you know, which that's all we cared about. But this Kimball, Mark Kimball, is the secretary or treasurer. Joe. What?
You're doing the invocation.
Surprise.
Okay. Lord, forgive me for calling him a turd.
Mr. Edwards, are you good?
Yeah.
Joe, you got it?
I got it. You surprised me.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Beautiful February evening, February 27th. Welcome to our city council meeting, all of you that are here. And we'll do our Pledge of Allegiance. I don't believe, is Mike Linville here? Oh, there he is, came in, okay. All right, you will, if you would, you'll lead us in an invocation following the Pledge of Allegiance. We'd appreciate it very much. Please rise. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pastor Linville, Eagle Creek Friends Church. Good to have you with us.
My pleasure. Let us pray. Our heads are bowed in reverence and our hearts in obeisance before you, most righteous and holy God, creator and sustainer of life. We humbly ask that you guide the thoughts and the decisions and the actions of this auspicious body, giving wisdom and giving direction. Help each one present to be sensitive to your still small voice, and may the actions of this body render the city of Westfield a place where those who live or visit here will recognize the superior hand of God in the planning and decisions and directions made here tonight. We pray this in the name of our loving Heavenly Father and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
And Honorable Mayor and Council, may the God of peace give you wisdom and give you direction tonight. God bless you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We need it. Mr. Johns, would you care to run the meeting, sir?
I will. Thank you, Mayor Cook. Cindy Gasser, would you take the roll, please?
Troy Patton. Is he on? Okay. Joe Edwards.
Here.
Scott Willis.
Here.
Cindy Spalgeric.
Here.
Jake Gilbert.
Here.
Mike Johns.
Here.
Scott Fry.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Cindy. We have one short change to the agenda. Judy Shuck is going to give us a short presentation this evening, being Black History Month, and talk a little bit about Westfield's Underground Railroad. First item, though, is approval of the minutes. The minutes, has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from the February 13th meeting? And are there any questions, changes, councilors? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 13th meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. Motion made by Jake Gilbert, seconded by Scott Willis. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Joe Edwards.
Yes.
Scott Fry.
Yes.
Scott Willis.
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric.
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Jake Gilbert.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. The next item is our claims docket this evening. Does anyone have any questions regarding the claims docket? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the claims docket for February 27th, 2023?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second made by Councilor Spalgeric, seconded by Councilor Fry. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Jake Gilbert.
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Scott Fry.
Yes.
Joe Edwards.
Yes.
Scott Willis.
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. With that, we'll begin our presentations for this evening. Judy Shuck, can you tell us a little bit about the old Westfield?
Good evening. You know, I love Westfield, and I especially love Westfield history, and I am so grateful for that history and so forth. I just want to, because of Black History Month, I just want to share some things about Westfield. Some of it you may already know, but this is a story that does not get told enough. The Underground Railroad had its beginnings in Indiana as early as 1831. The central route started in Louisville and Madison and made its way through Westfield, becoming known as the North Central Station of the Underground Railroad by 1837. This made Westfield, which became known throughout the country as the last hope for the slaves. For once a slave reached the city, there was little chance of the owner getting him back. The city was responsible for the freedom of more slaves than any other town in northern Indiana. Even the famous Frederick Douglass traveled through Westfield by the way of home of Ephraim Stout. Frederick Douglass. Whenever the great abolitionist leader Frederick Douglass and the state of Indiana are mentioned together, it is usually in reference to the mobbing of Douglass at Pendleton. Interestingly enough, were it not for a typographical error, a Westfield man would be included in this story counts as one of the defenders of Douglass. However, even aside from his brush with history, Micaiah C. White and his connection to the anti-slavery movement made for an inspiring story. The story of Douglass' assault is well known. In 1843, he was speaking on a tour of the Midwestern states. He and several members of the New England Anti-Slavery Society were trying to rouse abolitionist support in what was then considered the Western U.S. Regrettably, they met with hostility and threats. On September 16th, they were to speak at a church meeting in Pendleton. As they tried to speak, a mob stormed the platform, tearing it down and attacking the speakers. Douglass attempted to defend himself and the others by grabbing a club and swinging it vigorously. However, a stone was thrown, breaking his hand, and another stone knocked him briefly unconscious. Eventually, the mob relented and the party retreated to a safe house, which was a Quaker home of the Hardys. The Douglass's autobiography, My Life and Times, he used a curious sentence to describe what happened, saying, "They tore down the platform on which we stood, assaulted Mr. White, and knocked out several of his teeth, dealt a heavy blow on William A. White, striking him on the back of the head, badly cutting his scalp and felling to the ground. Most historians assumed that it was William White of Massachusetts who received this terrible beating alone. However, it turns out that an overzealous editor simply trimmed someone out of the manuscript." Our other sources supply the name William A. White himself wrote a description of the event in the October 13, 1843 issue of the newspaper, The Liberator. Indiana Quaker abolitionist Levi Coffin mentions it in his reminiscence published in 1876. Frederick Douglass himself mentions it in an August 1889 article for Cosmopolitan. After Douglass died in February of 1895, Thomas Lindley, of Westfield and J.B. Lewis of Fall Creek Township wrote down their memories in the incident, which were published in the local papers. Lindley's father had been at the meeting, had gotten his hat knocked off. Lewis did not witness the assault, but he was able to see Douglas speak a few nights later at Jonesboro, Indiana. According to all of these people, the injured man was Micaiah C. White of Westfield, Indiana. This would explain the odd sentence in the autobiography. Obviously, someone was confused by the two men named White. Unfortunately, this confusion has obscured Micaiah White's involvement, a man who deserves to be mentioned in the early abolitionists. He was born in New Garden, North Carolina in 1819 to a family of staunch Quakers with strong abolitionist leanings. His father's sister married Levi Coffin, the famous conductor on the Underground Railroad. The family moved from North Carolina to Milford, Indiana in 1827, and from there to Hamilton County. In 1833, the Whites were founding members of the Spiceland Quaker Meeting. In 1845, his sister Martha began keeping a diary, which presents a clear picture of the family's fortunes. Micaiah, or MC, as his family called him, joined the newly anti-formed anti-slavery meeting in Eagletown in 1845, 2 years after the assault. This was a group of dissident Quakers who felt they needed to take a proactive stance on the ending of slavery. These people were the ones most commonly involved in the local Underground Railroad. MC was disowned by the Spiceland meeting for this action. It seems to be obvious that MC would be involved in the Underground Railroad. There is a standard problem that, because it was a secret organization, there is little written evidence of its activities. However, Levi Coffin reported in his reminiscences that MC did assist him. So because of their abolitionist sympathies, the Whites probably were more aware of national affairs than most people. MC and Aaron Talbert went to the Republican National Convention in Chicago in May of 1860. It is unknown whether they attended as delegates or just spectators. This was, of course, the convention where Abraham Lincoln was nominated for the presidency. The only local story survives about MC's activities in the Underground Railroad involves a slave woman who reached Westfield just a step ahead of slave hunters sometime around 1850. MC's mother, Louisa White, owned an inn, and the fugitive was placed in hiding, where just as the slave hunters happened to walk in and ask for food. And lodging, Mrs. White calmly served them and then dressed the slave woman in some of her own clothes, including a large bonnet. The two of them coolly walked past the hunters and over to her son MC's house, where the woman was helped on her way. And we believe it was along Penn Street someplace. But anyway, MC recognized as a key figure in the local anti-slavery movement. And when the Civil War started in April of '61, members of the White family left the Quaker Church and joined the Army. MC's brother Isaac joined the 12th Infantry and 1-year regiment in 1862 and re-enlisted and joined the 101st Indiana and was appointed a second lieutenant. MC traveled to Virginia and so forth to try to enlist slaves. But MC would have been more proactive at the beginning of the ward, but was suffering from a series of lung ailments. Anyway, he became the military agent for Washington Township. The job of the military agent was to assist the families of soldiers who may have been suffering while the breadwinner was away from home. Does that sound familiar? They prospered there, and anyway, they moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where he became a druggist, and they prospered there, and he died at the age of 70, 6 years before Frederick Douglass. Anyway, I just want to end up that a lot of that story came from excerpts from David Highway, who's the Hamilton County historian. But I want to leave you with this. The escaping slave had no greater friends than those who aided them from Westfield. In Westfield, from that time until today, the colored man had been considered the equal of the white.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
That was pretty insightful, and hopefully you'll be able to tell that story. Maybe we can tell it in the Barker cabin next door here and share that with some of our young folks and some of the high school people. So, thank you very much. Moving along, then, our next presentation this evening is from Jonathan Nail with an update on progress for State Road 32.
Thank you. For the record, John Nail, Director of Public Works, City of Westfield. Been asked tonight to give a brief update on the State Road 32 project through our downtown. So to catch everyone up to speed, just so everyone's on the same page, this is the 32 project we're talking about. On the western limit, the Poplar Street roundabout just off the screen to the west. Eastern limit just east of East Street, inclusive of a new roundabout at State Road 32 and East Street. And in the middle of the screen there, you'll see the Union and 32 intersection. I was here in April of 22 to provide an update to council. And since then, we've accomplished several things. We convened a streetscape committee who selected MKSK as the landscape architecture firm to provide streetscape elements in the downtown corridor. When I talk about streetscape elements, what I mean are things like benches, trash receptacles, decorative lighting, landscaping, street trees, those things. Brick pavers are included in that as well. So that's what we mean when we say streetscape. We have since gotten MKSK's design. American Structure Point, who's our engineer on the road project, has included those elements into the road plans and submitted stage 3 plans to NDOT for review. Additionally, we've had continued historic mitigation coordination with our advisory team, and NDOT has accomplished some substantial right-of-way acquisition along the corridor. To speak to that, NDOT has acquired 28 parcels secured to date, and 8 parcels remain in condemnation. And the part that I think most of the council is interested in is the updated cost estimate. So you can see on the right-hand side of the slide our current projected cost estimate. In the middle is the project estimate that I presented in April of 22. Some things to note, the right-of-way acquisition costs have actually gone down since we presented in 22. As NDOT was able to secure more parcels, that number has actually decreased some, which is great news. And additionally, we have, that has been offset by an increase in some construction costs that we have seen in the market to date. So recently, we're obviously following NDOT bidding very closely since April, and we have adjusted some unit prices in the construction cost estimate to reflect what we're seeing in current market conditions for those construction pay items. The cost estimate, similar to last time I presented, includes all of the entitlements and relocation benefits that we are required to provide per the Uniform Act. It does include 8 condemnation parcels assumed to be the court-appointed appraisal amount. And then the construction cost estimate includes a 3% contingency that's down from 10% back in April. As we approach the bid letting, that contingency percentage comes down as we get more certain in the design and the unit costs. And again, the revised unit prices are based on market conditions that we're seeing. So risks, there are some risks to this estimate. The first risk I want to point out is the potential for jury trials on those 8 parcels that are in condemnation. When the Indiana Department of Transportation utilizes eminent domain for right-of-way acquisition, the property owner will receive a court-appointed appraiser's report with the appraisal amount from an independent 3 appraisers. They have the option to elect to go to a jury trial. Now, this can play out over several years. And so, again, the estimate that is before you assumes those court-appointed appraiser amounts hold, but we won't know until those property owners make a final decision in the condemnation proceedings. And what a court awards is unpredictable. And again, it could last several years still before that final ruling is provided. The second risk that I want to note is Duke Energy. We have worked with them on an estimate to provide overhead electric going underground through our corridor. The thing in particular I want to note is as we work through the relocation of the 102 South Union building, we are working closely with Duke to figure out how to de-energize or temporarily relocate some of the overhead electric lines that are between that 102 South Union building and the final resting place of that building. So we are still working with them to try and understand those costs and how to design that overhead electric to continue to provide electrical service to the downtown while that move takes place. So 2 risk items to keep in mind. Timeline, March 15th, we will have the demolition contract letting on the NDOT letting schedule. When I say letting, what I mean is that's a fancy way to say bid openings. So we have put together a demolition contract that is going through the NDOT letting process on March 15th. Contractors will submit bids, we'll open those bids and select a lowest responsible bidder. It'll take a few weeks to get that contractor under contract with NDOT, and from April to August, you're going to start to see demolition through the downtown for some of those buildings that are being demolished in advance of the road construction project. And we are still on schedule for the October letting, that is on October 12th, where we will open bids for the road construction itself. As this is going on, following demolition, there's going to be utility relocation through our corridor. So we will demolish the buildings to provide space for those underground and overhead electric utilities to go underground through our corridor outside of the future roadway pavement. And once that utility relocation is complete, road construction can begin. Lastly, I just want to point out and really give a shout out to our communications department. I want to talk about 32connects.com. This is a website that our Westfield communications team has put together. I've just been so impressed with their work on this. 32connects.com, although it's not live yet, there is a landing page that you can see on the screen before you. 32 Connects is going to be a one-stop shop for communication on the project throughout construction. So if you're a business owner and you want to know updates, the most up-to-date updates on the project, you go to 32connects.com. If you're a resident that wants to know where to park to access some of these businesses, they can go to 32connects.com. For right now, until we go live with the website, which will be in a couple weeks, you can sign up and get connected with the screen on the left side here, first name, last name, and email address to get connected, to get email updates on the project. But like I said, our communications team, Chris Profit, Michael Sinclair, and Sarah Blazier have done an awesome job helping us with this communication endeavor. They've even designed the logo itself, and I just want to say that NDOT was so impressed by their work on this that they've, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, I think, asked about potentially using them on future projects elsewhere in the state because they were so pleased with the results. And so just want to recognize their efforts on this 32connects.com. So with that said, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Council questions?
If you don't mind, no specific questions at this point. I appreciate the information.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, could we go back to the slide that had the spreadsheet with the numbers on it real quick?
Sure.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
While the councilors are looking at that, Quick question now, you mentioned the relocation of the building. How are we doing on that, and where is it going to?
Yeah, so you'll see a little bit of additional estimated cost on the environmental mitigation line item on this slide. That's related to, we actually hired a firm called Architecture Trio who specializes in these historic building relocations and refurbishments. So we've hired them to actually analyze 2 sites in the downtown area. And we've had several advisory team meetings in the last month and a half to try and hone in on that final site. In the most recent one, although some of the members of our advisory team are very adamant that they'd like to see it moved to Hadley Park, they're on the northwest corner of 32 and Union. We did discuss some of those site costs that would be required if that was the selected site. And we've made some progress in kind of moving towards the parcel that is just south of the Westfield Playhouse, so just to our west as we stand here today. That is certainly the city's preferred location, and it affords some additional room for a few parking spots, some other potential amenities on that site. So making good progress, still finalizing that location, but we've gotten some experts in the room to really help us through that process, and it's moving forward accordingly.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. One last question for me anyway is, so the final letting will be in October?
Yes.
Okay, and we're obligated to pay NDOT our portion of that. Is it 30 days or 60 days?
I think it's 30 or 45 days typically for an NDOT invoice.
So it would still be yet this year, the end
It'll
of
be
this
in
year.
23, that's correct. Now, I will point out that because of the unique nature of this 50-50 split, there's a little bit of accounting that's gonna go into it. We've spent some money up front on American Structure Point for PE services that needs to be accounted for. So there'll be a bit of an accounting exercise, but I would still fully expect to make that payment within 2023. The other thing that, as we're looking at this slide, I do want to point out, the construction cost that you're looking at here is not inclusive of streetscape elements. Jeremy's going to touch on the streetscape update, but it sounds like that is going to be a separate funding source for the streetscape. So I just want to be clear about that.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Can I ask a question about that? Entirely independent? Because I know there were some elements that were kind of an overlap as we were initially talking, I think to the tune of nearly $400,000, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. The number, the 10.5 number is reflecting the fact that some of those things overlap, but I've accounted for those overlaps and separating those out. So that 10.5 number is the estimated NDOT participation number. It does not include some of those overlap numbers you've talked about.
Okay.
I noticed we still have quite a bit coming out of a road impact fee line. I mean, we have different things that just need to come out of there. And I haven't seen the current balance on it, but what are we looking at?
As of February 16th, the balance was 9.6 million.
9.6 total in there?
Yes, correct.
It's going to be very close.
Yep.
Do you know how much we anticipate receiving in revenue in our time frame before?
We estimate about 4 million annually. So if you look towards the end of the year, you're right that it's going to be pretty close. I do want to point out that that 22.5 number is not an exact even split of what we're going to pay NDOT, because the PE services we've been paying Structure Point over the last 5 years accounts towards our contribution towards that amount, which is what I mean when I say there's going to be some accounting involved. When we open those bids for road construction, there's going to be streetscape elements that are separate that NDOT does not participate in. But additionally, there's going to be a participation construction cost and all the costs we've incurred to date with the 32 project. Once we take those into account, we're going to split the remaining 50-50, and that'll be the reflective invoice that we receive from NDOT. So it's not to say that we're going to owe $11.25 million necessarily. There's over $1 million we've spent in PE services to date to Structure Point for their ongoing design services. So that's going to get taken out of that number, if that makes sense.
And the roundabouts, the inside of them and what we're needing to put in there to meet our historic mitigation, that's not included in any of these, correct?
Correct. We've got an environmental mitigation number, and there's a little bit of money, I would say, in that 814 number. We haven't finalized the landscape design in those roundabouts with our advisory team, but from the renderings that I've seen, I think that it's a relatively small amount in dollars for some of the landscaping work.
Okay.
Yep.
And I know that you can't foresee this, but I know that we have ongoing problems with certain utility companies and them being timely. Are we going to potentially run into any of those kind of things that you can foresee a little bit anyway?
Question. I
Well,
mean, every
It kind
time.
of is. I mean,
every
is there a
time-
hierarchy in terms of like
We always
priority?
have problems with utilities, and these guys are well-versed in how to handle it, Cindy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a process, right? So you've got to get the buildings clear to allow space for the utilities to relocate. There's going to be a sequencing in place where Duke owns the poles for the overhead electric, but there's several comms lines that are also under builds on those poles. So Duke has to relocate, then the comms have to relocate. We're actively managing that process throughout on this project. The utility relocation is a project in and of itself. We've got 15 plus utilities in our downtown that have to be clear of our road contractor. So yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but we're going to work through it.
Given the importance and the scope of this project and that it's NDOT and combined with us, do you think that moves it on any kind of hierarchy, if you will, with these utility companies, that they would prioritize those, or is it literally just a get in line?
It's possible, but what I will say is that Westfield, in my department, we've worked really, really hard to create good relationships with these utility companies. Adam Essex on my team focuses completely on utility coordination in the city, and we've worked hard to build a rapport with these facilities. So I certainly like to think that they will jump when we ask them to, but it will remain to be seen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's a great recap. Really appreciate that. Next presentation is by Jeremy Lawler, who's going to give us an update on the Streetscape Committee.
Sure, yeah, mine is a much less professional presentation. So as John described, since the last time we got an update on the streetscape, which was really at the end of design development, so you saw the pretty images of what it's gonna look like. MKSK, along with John and his team and Chris McConnell, the park superintendent, have been working alongside Structure Point to get to the 90% design stage, which is all submitted to NDOT currently. Right now, we're in a holding pattern until we get comments back from NDOT, so we can incorporate whatever requests or changes that they have. From a price perspective, we're still within that identified number. So you all, I believe, set out a $4 million number. We are at or below that right now, based on the engineer's estimate.
Do we have a final pictorial that we can share with the council? So what the streetscape will look like, final design? Or do we need to wait for
We do,
NDOT?
but it's very black and white. They're construction drawings. So it's just like a road plan. So the actual physical construction, as far as the aesthetic of it, it doesn't look any different than what it did before. They took those plans and designed what is actually going to be constructed, which is the same.
Okay. Everyone comfortable? Okay. Good. And the cost, we're still thinking little less than 4 million.
I'm confident right now will be less than 4 million, yes.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So some of that accounting still needs to happen from John's end when bids come back, and all kinds of things credits given and stuff like that, so.
What will the timeline be then for ultimately the completion of the streetscape? Well, not the completion, but the completion of the design. You said we're 90% of the way there. Will we have that finalized in April or May?
Yeah, in order to hit the October letting for NDOT, there's about 4 months in advance that NDOT requires final tracing so that their contract people can pull together final contracts and advertise for bids and so forth. So I'd say the absolute drop dead date is June, but we're looking to even beat that.
Jeremy and Jonathan, do you think that MKSK will be able to give us maybe some updated drawings then that we can share with the residents of Westfield as far as what it's going to look like?
When you say drawings, you mean renderings? So like
Yeah,
some kind of artistic picture?
Yes.
So I don't believe that that's in their contract scope, but I can certainly have the conversation with them.
If we can do that without spending a lot of money to do that, I think the residents would kind of like to know what it's going to look like.
Yeah, and for all practical purposes, it is what we've shown before. There's not really been any other decisions made. The decisions were all made on what it's gonna look like when we got to that stage and presented it to you all and got the nod to move forward. This is all the very technical stuff to make sure water drains and plants are in the right spot and not interacting with utility relocates and the utility, corridors. It's all the technical stuff. And we can get you the drawings. They're not very pretty.
And we can talk about it more. It's not,
Yeah.
we don't have to talk about it tonight, but it's just, I think it's more of a marketing, which you guys do such a good job at. But letting the public know what it's gonna look like.
Sure.
Roundabouts not included, right, Jeremy?
The interior of the roundabouts are not
The
included.
interior
Perimeters of the
roundabout, right.
roundabouts are included, yes. And the only reason the interiors aren't is because that group is working on what that historic interpretation is going to be inside.
Which Cindy basically just referenced. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
The next item on tonight's agenda, we talked about the council's approval of the mayor's appointments for the Preservation Commission. We were hoping that we could get the council some additional information as to who the folks were that are tentatively selected.
Yeah, and I have that for you.
And
You got it? Okay.
Appointments are?
yeah, yes.
Okay, which I announced last time. I'll go back over that. Diane Payton is the president of the Westfield, Washington Historical Society. Kevin Miller is Director of Engineering Services at an engineering firm, so he has a background in what the design and engineering of a building could be. Randy Zentz is a local developer here. His background would help us in market and pricing and real estate knowledge. And Melody Jones is our past parks director here, and she is currently a professional real estate and a resident of downtown, as is Teresa Skelton, is our fifth member, and Teresa was part of the Grand Junction Task Group that began many, many years ago, and to the best of my knowledge, she's lived on Union Street, I think, all of her life. So I think we've got a good rounded group here that can fulfill the requirements of what we've been charged to do.
Any questions, Councilor?
I have some kind of concerns. I was hopeful that there would be people who had certain skills in terms of architecture, historic preservation, at least interest in it. And I just don't know that the package there is going to give us that experience.
Well, we've been talking about this for at least 2 months. It's been on the table. I have not heard one suggestion from any of you. I have not had any persons expressed interest to me. So if you have suggestions, I wish I'd have had them earlier, because these are my appointments.
Quick question, there are 5 voting members to be selected, but there's also an opportunity for 4 non-voting members as commission. If we can get you some additional suggestions within the next couple weeks, do you see we could move forward and add the remaining, or the possible 4 voting, non-voting members to the commission?
Yeah, I guess, but I'll repeat, I wish I had expressed interest from people before now, or we would have made them voting
Yeah,
members.
and I'm sorry, I did see a list, I did see a letter with some names on it. I thought you had a copy of that. So it, for whatever reason, crossed my desk, didn't cross yours. So, and I apologize for that, I thought you had it. I will get that letter to you. So,
One of the complicating factors that we have is that I have not heard of too many people with this kind of background, unfortunately, that are it's a very kind of specific background. The people who I think would be helpful to actually serve on this are potentially not actual residents, and the ordinance does specify that they need to be residents. So it's a bit of a complicating matter. I'm gonna reach out and do some homework, but there's a lot that goes into this commission. There's a lot of responsibility. I know it's gonna have legal involved. It has our staff involved. There has to be a survey, potentially districts identified. There's a lot to it. So, I mean, it's not a small little side thing, if you will. There's a lot of different details that are going to need to be weighed importantly. So I wish I knew about this, this whole side of the historic preservation much more than I do. I don't have expertise. I wish I knew some that did. If anyone's out there that knows anybody, that's a resident, please get with us. Be helpful. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, I will get you that list of individuals. And you want to take a vote tonight?
Sounds like if you're waiting on list of individuals, we should wait.
Yeah. What, I'm going to ask.
Are you not going to approve these then?
I would like you to get you a full list of candidates so that you've got a full list for your consideration. And we
Well,
can do that within the
I wish I'd have known that prior to tonight's meeting. I didn't know that you wanted 4 more people on this commission. You didn't say that a couple weeks. I gave you my 5 people 2 weeks ago. Nobody said a word. So I don't know why it's coming up 2 weeks later. But
And I'm sorry, I was out of the country, so part of that is my fault. So I apologize.
But I've been
I
working.
was made aware that there was at least one of these people who actively spoke against the historic, at least our downtown being on the registry nationally. So that concerns me. So that's why.
Well, it concerns me that we're just having this discussion months after we've began the process. So these are my 5
Okay.
designatees. I would ask for your approval.
Do I have a vote to, do I have a motion to approve these this evening?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion to accept these as presented this evening made by Councilor Gilbert, seconded by Councilor Willis.
Mike, I'm confused as to where we're at with this right now. I apologize for interrupting. Are we not in the middle of a conversation to discuss this a little bit further? I mean, is a vote premature?
Well, these are his nominees, so we either approve them or we don't.
Yeah, so since the motion and the second, we have to vote, you can have a discussion on the vote, but there has to be a vote.
4 can be added at an additional time, but in terms of, we can't make him nominate someone else, we can vote no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything stopping us from adding additional names down the road?
I personally don't have anyone, but understanding the circumstances that there are other counselors that are concerned about this and want to dive a little bit deeper into this and make sure we've got the right mix. I think it's appropriate. And again, I don't necessarily have a dog in the fight, to be honest with you. It's, but knowing that there are concerns, I just feel like, waiting and getting the approval at the next meeting, if there is a change to be made, we can take that time to do that. It's a lot easier to do that before we vote than it is after we vote. That's the whole point that I'm trying to make.
So what we're saying then basically is, I just want to make sure I understand this, Councilor Fry. It's not a matter of adding additional resources to this committee, it's whether we accept the mayor's 5. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that correct? Because we can add additional people with the resources and the skill set, I think Councilor Spoljaric was looking for at a later date, can we not? Or does that have to all be voted at the same time? Or?
Well, the ordinance does specify 5 and 4, so the 4 non-voters is in the ordinance also. So the question becomes, and I was kind of hoping that we'd have a chance to discuss this more with the mayor in a different forum, and not necessarily in public, because I think we've got probably 5 good candidates, but we may have 10 good candidates to select from, and I was hoping to give the mayor some additional folks to look at.
Was this discussed during our pre-council meeting, or?
At the pre-council, we just simply asked for, can we have some background on the people that he has selected?
Okay.
So there's a motion on the floor that should be voted on. If you want to consider non-voting members downstream, you're certainly welcome to do that.
For clarity, though, the 4 non-voting members can be added.
Yes, at the mayor's nomination, the council's approval.
Right, the mayor still has to nominate
Correct.
these individuals.
Yeah, the mayor, you don't take away that process. The mayor still has to nominate any individual before you have the opportunity to approve or disapprove.
My bigger point is we've had a long time on this. We've been working on boards and commissions for forever. We were pressing the mayor, because I know I specifically pressed the mayor twice about, hey, when are we going to have these? I had no recommendations. Apparently, none of us had recommendations. These 5 people are willing to take on this duty, which Cindy just said is a big responsibility. So that's why I made the motion that they deserve a vote. Now, if they're the wrong people, vote them down. But I didn't have alternatives and better, and I pressed the mayor twice to get us the names, and if they did the work and these people stepped up, I think we've been pressing to get these names for weeks now, and now here they are, and now we're going to push it off. So that's why I made the motion for the vote. I think they deserve the vote.
I appreciate that, Counselor Gilbert, and to your point, I don't have anyone. I'm sure this is a fine committee. My only concern is the vote. If we feel like there are others that could be involved, and to go ahead and vote now might be premature. That's the only point that I was making.
I have a question. Would the others be listened to? I think we do. I back up Councilor Spoljaric's idea that we add some additional skill to this committee. I've lived around here longer than just about anybody, even longer than Judy Shuck, and she knows it. And I think that's something we need to do. Now, living around here doesn't give you that kind of skill set, but we need additional eyes upon this. And I think we could do better by adding some people, even if they're non-voting, they're going to have some ideas, and they'd have to be listened to. They need to be listened to.
I would personally be concerned if there's somebody that's been recommended who has in the past voted against having a preservation committee. I kind of question whether that person, what positive could they add to this if they were against it from the beginning? So,
Do we
and I don't
vote
know
on
who
these
it
as
is.
individuals, Manny,
Well,
or
I
do we
think
vote on
that-
this as a group?
Yeah, and I think that that is, I mean, I can carry that over to the entire 32 project. There's a number of people here that voted against the 32 project, but in light of the majority is the way we work. We're all working together to take the 32 project forward. So I don't,
Manny, do we vote on these individually or as a collective? No, the way the motion was made and seconded, it was a collective.
What is the motion on the floor, Counselor?
I beg your pardon?
What is the motion on the floor?
To approve the mayor's nominations. And it's been seconded.
Any other comments?
I would not be in favor of it until we add some extras.
All right, Cindy, you want to call the roll, please?
Okay, Joe Edwards,
No,
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeric,
No.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
No.
Scott Fry.
No.
Okay, motion fails 2-4.
I would ask that we, perhaps the mayor and I get together over the next 2 weeks, and that I will see if, put out a word if anyone knows of anyone that would be, you feel, or they feel would like to be, participate. If you get me the name, I will sit down and present it to the mayor with their qualifications.
So just for procedural purposes, Manny, so since we voted this down, does this slate completely go away and he has to start over, the mayor, or how does that work? Can it come right back to us?
So you can come right back with the same exact people.
Great,
If he so chooses.
Please don't get me wrong, all the people that were recommended are very fine people. It's just, in terms of this specific commission and what is required of them, that is my concern. I'll work diligently to try and find people, and I hope I can.
and I hope that the ones that I've spent 3 months venting are still willing to serve after your negative vote. You've put me in a very bad position.
we'll just have to see how it comes out.
Well, I'm disappointed you feel that way, Mayor. I think we as a council, we try to do the best we can for this city. And this is a forum that we have to discuss some of these issues. We can discuss some in private and some we discuss in public. And I would have preferred to discuss some of this in private, but this is a public forum, so I respect everybody here. Moving ahead then this evening, we'll move on to old business. Resolution 23-103, approving certain real property improvement within the city of Westfield for tax abatement. This is the Stellhorn North Point LLC Shell Building. It had a council introduction on February 13th. It's up for adoption consideration this evening. And Kai Chuck, our Director of Economic Development, is going to address this item.
Evening, councilors. For the record, Kai Chuck, Economic Development Department. I'm here to present the Shell Building abatements. The abatements are on 3 buildings on 10 years on real property. The abatement schedule is your standard the standard deduction. At year 1 at 100%, and at year 10 at 10%. The Shell buildings in question will be located northeast section of North Point Business Park, specifically North Point Commerce Business Park on the northeastern side of the park along State Road 38. This area here, the entire yellow area, has been established as an ERA back in 2019. Building number 1 will be on lot number 1, approximately 16,000 square feet on approximately 2 acres. Estimated value of $2.9 million. 10-year tax abatement estimated value would be around $290,000. Job commitments for this particular building are 6 jobs at $28 per hour. Building number 2 will be directly across from building number 1 on lot number 2, approximately 32,000 square feet on approximately 2.3 acres, estimated investment value of $6 million. 10-year tax abatement estimated value would be around $605,000. The company has committed to retain 8 jobs at $44 an hour and create 4 new jobs at $27 per hour. Building number 3 will be on lot number 4, approximately 53,600 square feet on approximately 5.8 acres. Estimated value of this investment will be $7.8 million. 10-year actual estimated value on the property tax abatement will be $788,000. Job commitments for this building are 12 at $28 per hour. All 3 buildings, the estimated investment value would be $16.8 million, 8 retention jobs, 22 new jobs. The estimated value of the abatements, all 3, is $1.6 million. Also, I need to highlight Section 3 of the resolution stating that GB and LG district permitted uses under the Plan Unit Development Ordinance shall not be eligible for abatement under this resolution. This is very similar to what Holiday committed to in terms of Building 3 in that area where I believe LG was also permitted use in their area. The representatives and the petitioners are here present, but they do not plan to present. Both them and myself will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kai. Councilors, do you have any questions?
I'm excited, just one quick comment. I'm excited about the square footage that comes with these because I've been hit up by a few companies who are interested in Westfield that are looking for that square footage. It'd be nice to get this rolling where we can hopefully capitalize on that. So,
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve Resolution 23-103.
I'll second that.
Motion has been made to approve the Resolution 23-103 by Councilor Edwards, seconded by Councilor Willis. Would you call the roll, Cindy, please?
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeri,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Fry.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thanks, Kai. Our next item on this evening's agenda, ordinance 23-01, appropriating infrastructure improvement funds for spend in 2023. This item had a council introduction on February 13th. It will have up for public hearing this evening and then adoption consideration this evening. Jeremy Lawler, can you give us a quick review of this?
Yes, I certainly can. Certainly, I'd be happy to. This ordinance is as was introduced, so no changes. If you recall, the bulk of this money being appropriated is the transfer from the RDC back to the city for the repayment of the Grand Park loan. More specifically, $710,000 of this $3.543 million that is being appropriated is going to purchase the piece of land that we won at auction a few weeks ago, which is scheduled to close on Friday. The remaining $2.833617 million will be set aside specifically for costs associated with the State Road 32 streetscape. It is expected that we will need to come back and do an additional appropriation to the Infrastructure Improvement Fund once we have bids back from the 32 project, understanding that $2.833617 may not be enough. But that will be after you receive the additional $3 million into the Infrastructure Improvement Fund from the RDC. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
Happy to answer any questions, but I do know you have a public hearing, so however you'd like to do it.
Let's do the public hearing, open the public hearing first, and we'll have councilor comments. So we'll open the public hearing at 7:59. Kevin, Todd, we have any questions, comments? No, okay. Let's give it 30 seconds or so anyway. Okay, we will close the public hearing at 8 o'clock this evening. Counselors, comments? Questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 23-01.
Have a second?
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Willis, second by Counselor Edwards. Cindy, will you call the roll, please?
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Cindy Spalteric,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Joe Edwards.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you all, appreciate it.
We can start that streetscape. All right. Our next item, Resolution 23-104, accepting settlement, authorizing execution of participation in settlement agreements concerning the national opioid litigation. I should mention, this is in a new business category. This item is up for adoption consideration this evening, and Jeremy and Manny, I think, are going to give us some info.
Yeah, I'll let Manny speak to the technical terms, but just give you a brief overview. You may recall a very similar settlement that we entered into last year with the manufacturers of the opioid drugs. This is specific to Meyer Pharmacy. So Meyer has reached a settlement as well as a part of that legal battle. Our portion, this would allow us to enter into that settlement. There will be a future resolution coming. There is a third settlement that is the larger pharmacies that will be coming down the line. In pre-council, I told you there would be two. I misspoke. We've got the notification letter for the other settlement, but we're not ready to enter into that yet. So I'll turn it over to Manny to answer any legal questions that you have.
Will these funds, will there be restricted and non-restricted uses that are given to us?
Yeah, so the amount is net about 46,000 from this settlement because of the way it's structured and the impact on Westfield specifically. And I don't believe these are restricted. Like the other ones, that was a very specific agreement, and pursuant to state statute, there was obviously some that were restricted and some non-restricted. These don't have that qualification. Thank you, Mayor. These don't have that qualification like the prior settlement did, and the distribution of that prior national settlement eventually through state statute. So this money will be received, as Jeremy said, we'll probably come back next month, or at the latest the month after, to discuss another one. But commend the city, commend the mayor for being at the forefront in Indiana of pursuing these claims.
When would we get this payment?
I don't know exactly, but there has to be there's a certain participation threshold of settling entities. Once that threshold is reached, then it's in accordance with the settlement terms. This one is not 8, 10, 12 years like the previous one, so it'll be at some point soon. But it's hard to tell at this point to pinpoint when that is, sorry.
We haven't had discussions really about this money. See a couple of our Chief Rush in the background. I just asked maybe public safety as when we get to the point that the money becomes expendable with all the guidelines on restrictions and non-restrictions. It'd be great to hear from public safety their ideas on what this money could go towards, since it's designed to stop the opioid epidemic. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And it would be probably worthwhile after the next round to kind of map out the amounts and when they're coming through, and maybe have an executive session and meet with chiefs to be able to work through some of those planning issues.
Manny, if I may, I'm going to go ahead and ask the crazy question. If we don't take this money, where does the money go?
It'll be distributed back into a common fund to be distributed probably to the lawyers to some degree, although they get a cut anyway. But because it's a multi-district litigation, there's a separate fund for certain of these that go to trial, that take on the burden of pursuing these. They get a bigger cut. This would just go back to the pot to be distributed among the other entities.
Any other comments? Well, do I have a motion to approve resolution 23-104?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Willis, seconded by Counselor Edwards. Cindy, would you call the roll, please?
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Cindy Spalgeri.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Great. Well, that ends the body of our work this evening. Do we have any residents who wish to address the council this evening? No? Okay. Clerk Treasurer comments?
I do not.
City Council comments? We did not have an APC meeting this past week, so there's no report from there. Any other comments? No? Mayor comments? Okay. With that, then, we'll end our meeting this evening, February 27th. Thank you.